Good morning. I'm getting a late start here. It's 8:30. I had a meeting, so getting a little bit late start. So lecture today, we're going to finish up imperialism, and then we're going to move into World War One today. So you do have an assignment, so make sure that you look at that assignment as well. I'm going to take my mask chain off because that drives me nuts. All right. So I think we had finished the bottom of page 9. We had discussed that Great Britain is imperializing India. And we talked about some of the positive things that Great Britain's going to bring to India. Negative things, again, will be that they will create kind of another caste system in the aspects that certain groups of Indians will get preferential treatment over others, Hindus over Muslims, that will perpetuate that in all kinds of difficult ways, and especially after India gains its independence. It's the reason why there's a country called Pakistan, because when India gets their own country, they try to push all the Muslims out and they get their country, Pakistan. So that's long drawn out. So the bottom of page 9, other British colonies in Asia will be Burma, Malay, North Borneo. None of these things are the countries named this any longer because they all went back to their names like Myanmar and all of those. France is going to get, again, really limited because, again, if we think about France never really developed a strong navy. They still don't have a strong navy. So their ability to imperialize was somewhat limited because they didn't have the navy to move around. But they are going to be in Indochina. Indochina is modern-day Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos. In the South Seas, they're going to have Tahiti and New Caledonia. Germany is going to move into the Pacific. They see that area, the Marshall Islands, Samoa, and Germany and the United States in the late 1880s, 1890s are really going to come close a couple of times to war over some of these islands. The Spanish-American War, the United States finally gets involved in 1898. And at that point, there's not a lot of stuff left for the United States. And so the United States will get the Philippines, Guam, Hawaii, and Cuba, which is significant. Again, other than the Philippines, we still control Guam. Guam is a territory of the United States. What also should be on this list is Puerto Rico. Hawaii becomes a state. Cuba, we kind of have a little teeny tiny bit of Cuba, Guantanamo Bay. We also get Puerto Rico in this, and Puerto Rico is still a territory of the United States and United States citizens. Now we're going to move into Asia. Again, the responses to Western imperialism in Asia will be the Chinese will eventually respond to that idea, as Maddie was so incredulous about yesterday, like they can do whatever they want. And eventually, I didn't want to spoil it by saying, yeah, something happened. It's this thing called the Boxer Rebellion. So first, the Boxer Rebellion is called that by Westerners because we don't understand what like Tai Chi and I don't know what martial arts are Chinese, but I don't want to say like Kung Fu. I think it might be Kung Fu, but we don't understand those types of motions or those martial art. So we call them boxers, which they're not really boxers. They're martial artists. In the 1900s, young men, again, which are usually the people that have the most virile response to people coming in and taking over their country. They have this patriotic uprising by these Chinese nationalists, and they're all young men, part of these martial arts clubs, and they will begin attacking what they see as the group of people that brought this all in, and it's missionaries. So one of the difficulties for them is that they target missionaries first, and those missionaries include a whole lot of nuns. And so of the 300 to 400 people that they kill, a lot of them are women, a lot of them are nuns, and then of course priests, preachers, and that just doesn't go over well with the world public that you're killing church people. And so what happens is this multinational force comes in, guns blazing, and they will defeat, obviously, very easily, the rebellion of the Boxers and continue their take of China. Now, in the middle of all this is a country called Japan. And I'm not going to go in this back story of all this, what happened back, because Japan is not in our wheelhouse. And the only reason that we're looking at Japan is because eventually Japan becomes involved in this gigantic World War II thing. They play a minor role in World War I. But what we need to know is at the bottom of page 10 that there is a short 1-year war called the Russo, that's Russia, Japanese War. So this big, giant country of Russia is defeated by this little teeny tiny island of Japan. And it sends shockwaves throughout the world. Shockwaves. Russia and Japan both had designs on Manchuria and Korea. They both want them. Japan already knows they need them for their industrialization might. They need oil and fuel to fuel their machine. And they don't have it on their island. They want Manchuria. They want Korea. So Japan attacks Russia and in a year destroys them. Westerners horrified that Japan had defeated a major Western power. This is just the beginning. And this is why people who don't really know history or just say, oh, I'm a history buff, and they want to talk about December 1941, it's 1904 when Japan begins this, and the world ignores it. Treaty of Portsmouth is mediated by U.S. President Theodore Roosevelt, in which he wins a Nobel Peace Prize for this. Long-term impact of this short 1-year war, Russia turned to the Balkans. That's going to be our World War I. The Russian Revolution, because the people of Russia are like, what the heck just happened? What happened? Tsar, how did we get defeated by an island? Like, how? How did that even happen? Japan is going to get Korea, and revolt of Asia in the 20th century, which that's going to take a long time. All right. On the top of page 11 is our last little look, and it is, I hope you see, short and small and almost insignificant at the end of this chapter. Critics of imperialism. You aren't going to find many, right? In the United States, when we're at this time period, you will find lots. We have lots of people in the United States that are anti-imperialist. In Europe, none. We got this guy, Karl Marx, and nobody's going to jump on his ship because he's a communist. Claimed that the bourgeoisie needed constant expanding markets to increase profit. This would lead to conquest in his very famous Karl Marx book, Das Kapital, The Capitalist. Hobson, most prominent of the anti-imperialist theorists, stated that imperialist powers needed colonies in order to provide new markets, claimed that businessmen and bankers unduly influence governments' imperialistic policies, which they do, believed that if European governments forced businesses to raise wages for workers, this would result in increased consumption. And again, anti-imperialism increased in Europe as a result of Hobson's work, but it doesn't take hold. It really won't, other than Russia, and they're kind of dealing on the Karl Marx thing, not Hobson thing. So that ends that. Please make sure that you look at those terms. Make sure you understand all of that idea of imperialism, what's happening, why it's important. So now we move to the most important part of this is the Great War. So we already talked about our long-term causes of World War I, and one of those was alliances, that maniacs. And again, you might want to write this on this page again because it's really important. Alliances. So the alliances are significant because of the alliances that are very public and the alliances that are secret. And that's the secret alliances that are going to make all of these. Now, significantly important for us, you don't have to know these because it is so convoluted and mixed up and entangled. What you just need to know about these alliances was that they crossed over and made it really difficult. So the purpose of an alliance for a country is protection. So the United States has an alliance with a lot of countries in NATO. And it simply says, if your country is attacked, we are obligated to come to your aid. It's why these alliances are really difficult because you are agreeing to support a country if they're attacked or anything that they do without really having any, like, why did they attack you? Did you deserve to be attacked? So alliances are difficult. They, in the late 20th and 21st century, have pretty much helped us avoid war because of all of that stuff. But at the beginning of World War I, at the beginning of the 20th century, we don't yet have that. So we've got this big, giant front page of alliances. What's going to happen, and the eventual alliances that will be in World War I, will be the Triple Alliance and the Triple Entente. Now, it's also significant to know that we don't refer to these like we will in World War II as like good guys and bad guys, because that is another part of World War I that makes it difficult. There's not a bad guy. There is not a bad guy. And it's why the United States stays out of the war for so long, because there's not a side to pick. So the Triple Alliance will be Austria, Italy, and Great Britain. The Triple Entente will be Great Britain, France, everybody else. So we'll go through that. So rival alliances, the Triple Entente and the Triple Alliance. In 1870, balance of power upset by Prussia. So we know that in 1870, when Germany becomes a country, the balance of power is upset forever. Bismarck feared a French revenge, wants to isolate France. Bismarck fears Russia because they're sandwiched in between. And so we get this dual alliance first between Germany and Austria. That's an alliance that makes sense. Remember, there could have just as easily been Austria as part of Germany. They have a common language, a common heritage, a common culture. So that alliance makes sense. So Bismarck gets a dual alliance with Austria. Becomes a major feature of European diplomacy. In 1881, Italy, that again newly formed country, is going to join with Austria as well. So mental picture of Europe, this whole middle part, like if you just draw a line, now is an alliance. Germany, Austria, Italy. So think about that boot and go straight up. That whole line is now an alliance. And it makes sense, right? You got enemies on both sides. We got this big, strong alliance in the middle. The Triple Alliance, the Russian-German reassurance policy promised neutrality if both Germany or Russia went to war with another country. So Bismarck says, we just need to say that we are not going to go with war to each other. Bismarck gets that sign. That's his realpolitik. Kaiser Wilhelm refused to renew the reassurance policy after removing Bismarck. That was a really bad move. Splendid isolation for Great Britain, 1891. Great Britain is the only one that doesn't have an aligned power. They don't need it. They're doing their thing, growing their empire. They got their ships all over the place. They don't need it. Anglo-Japanese alliance. Great Britain sought a Japanese agreement, but in 1901, and again, that will happen. Again, part of that is access to Asia. Let's flip the page. The Triple Entente on the back of page 2 in 1907 is Britain, France, and Russia. So they formed their alliance to check Germany, Austria, and Italy. So it's kind of like, you have an alliance, I'm going to have an alliance. Okay. Everything that we're leading up to 1914 is what's called a one-upmanship. You got this, I'm going to have this. Not only am I going to have it, but I'm going to have one better than you. And again, this will be what we're looking at on page 2, the Anglo-German arms race. So when we talk about an arms race, arms are armature. That's the whole, it's weapons. It's a weapons race. It just sounds better when you say arms race instead of a weapons race, but that's actually what it is. It is the militarism. So it's the M in the maniacs that we're getting ready to discuss. So military lead to the belief in the inevitability of a general European war. So it begins when Germany overtakes Great Britain in the industrialization war in 1890s. So now Germany is outproducing. And what starts to happen is the idea of let's start building weapons. Let's use our technology to build these gigantic weapons. Now, we already have an Austrian woman who sees this already in, I think it's 1889. She already writes a book about it. Like, this needs to stop. Her book is very poetically lay down the arms, like stop building these weapons, stop making guns, stop making these big giant projectiles to launch on people. Contributed to the founding of peace societies in Austria and Germany, and obviously they don't work very well. British policy was to have its fleet larger than the combined fleets of any two rival nations, and it's getting harder and harder for Great Britain to do that, especially with the buildup of the United States Army and the buildup of Germany's army. So the British policy is take the two biggest navies, put them together, and we need to have more ships than that. And so they are building ships. Kaiser begins an expansion of the German Navy, and by World War I, both Britain and Germany possessed dreadnoughts. And a dreadnought is a super battleship. Like its only thing that it's built for is battle, right? It is, and it has a awesome firing range. It has great power, and these become the battleships of the oceans. So that's our aim. We're just building all these things. Imperialism, again, we already talked about that, led to increased tensions between between the great powers over Africa. We've already talked about all that. The Berlin Conference, the scramble for Africa, the top of page 3. Britain, France, the United States, and Russia saw Germany as a potential threat. Germany becomes the threat. And like I said yesterday, Cardinal Richelieu is standing up in his grave saying, I told you, I told you, I told you so. Germany becomes further isolated. That's an important part too, that instead of working through diplomatic channels to deal with this growing threat of Germany, what the countries do is isolate them. We learn eventually that is not a good policy and it's not a good program, because every time we do that, and I mean we as a collective world, every time we do that, that nation, the population in that nation binds together like, see, everybody hates us, and it explodes in this nationalistic pride that sends us always into war. Germany decried encirclement, right? Like, you guys are doing all of this to us. And that's, again, exactly what this leads to, this rise of nationalistic, I don't want to say pride, but this nationalistic, everybody's against us and we all have to band together. And it makes people in those countries who normally would not participate in that thing be part of that thing, because it is everybody's against us. We all have to band together and show this German strength, and that's what leads us down the garden path of war in part of your assignment. So, Triple Entente was created in response. So, the Second Moroccan Crisis in 1911, a German gunboat sent to Morocco to protest French occupation. Germany doesn't care if France occupies Monaco. Why? Because they got all their own. But what they're doing is being an antagonist. They pick on France because France doesn't have the ability to take care of itself. So who comes? Great Britain comes to save the day. And as a result, when Britain shows up, Germany backs down. So Germany was not about protecting the people of the people of Monaco from France, because if they had been successful, Germany would have swooped in and taken Monaco. What they were doing was provoking France. How far can we push France? And Britain comes quickly to the aid. So the next letter in our maniacs is nationalism. And this nationalism is huge. Like, without this nationalism, all the other things would have happened, but leading to war, perhaps not, or perhaps in a different way. Nationalism creates this powder keg of the Balkans. So the Balkans is a peninsula, and in many political cartoons, the peninsula is like a barrel of dynamite with a fuse. That's what this is. World War I starts in the Balkan Peninsula. The Ottoman Empire is leaving. The sickle man, we've talked about that for quite some time. And who's going to take up the power in those Balkans? This pan-Slavism, a national movement to unite all the Slavic people. Serbs, Bosnians, Slovenes, Croats, and Russians. Russians are Slavs as well. So it's important to note that we're going to have a series of Balkan crises leading up to 1914. So the first one, and they all take place in the summer, and Europe looks at them as that, oh, these hot heads in the summer when the weather gets hot, they kind of lose their heads and shoot people, but nothing ever really happens. So that is what happens. In 1908, Austria annexes Bosnia. War was averted because Russia wasn't ready, and France, I'm not fighting over the Balkans, France says. The first Balkan War is in Serbia, Greece, Bulgaria, allied to successfully drive the Turk out of the Balkans. So that's gone. That's 1912. In 1913, the same summer, second Balkan, or at the same time, the summer in 1913, Bulgaria was angered that Serbia and Greece had acquired territory. Serbia wants this. Austria comes with German support against the Russians, and Serbia is still frustrated that it has no access to the Serbian Sea. Albania gets its independence. Russia says, ooh, I can't really help you. We got to pull back. And the Third Balkan War kind of holds on, and it eventually will become World War I in 1914. So how do we get to World War I? The immediate is assassination. The immediate cause of World War I is the assassination of the Archduke Ferdinand. He is the Austrian heir to the throne, and he's going to be assassinated by a Serbian nationalist princip. He's a member of a terrorist group called the Black Hand. So this will be the end of our story, because I love this story so much, and this will be the end of our lecture. So Franz Ferdinand marries beneath him and marries a commoner. Her name is Sophie. His uncle is the emperor of Austria. He doesn't like his nephew very much. He doesn't like his heir, and so he sends him out often on trips to represent the crown. He doesn't like him, and he really doesn't like Sophie. So his uncle says, "Why don't you go to the Balkans?" Well, the Balkans is a war zone. Like, they're shooting people, they're shooting monarchs all the time. But Franz Ferdinand, wanting to be a good heir to the throne, says, okay, uncle, I will go. So big, published in the newspaper, the heir to the throne is coming to Serbia, and here's where he's going to be, and he's going to come in a parade route. We have cars now, so he's going to drive in a car and drive through the town. And what happens is the mayor of oh God, where's the town? I can't remember the town. Belgrade. I think it's Belgrade. Anyway, the mayor shows up at the train station and says, look, Franz, there are people here that want to kill you. There have already been 5 pipe bombs explode. Look, I've already been injured. He has blood on them. Trying to read this welcome. And he says, we really need to change your parade route because everybody knows where you're going to be. I don't think it's a good idea. So Franz Ferdinand says, yeah, good idea. Let's change the parade route. And if you recall, I have been telling you about the Austrian-Hungary Empire. Their difficulties with controlling the empire is they have lots of different ethnicities, nationalities, and that is the issue with nationalism, that all these people and that's what's happening in the Balkans, all these people of parts of the Austrian-Hungary Empire don't want to be part of it. So this is the prime example of how empires are difficult. Franz Ferdinand turns to all the drivers in his motorcade and says, auf Deutsch, in German, we are changing the motorcade route. This is where we're going. We're going down this Strasse. We're going to make a left-hand turn instead of a right-hand turn. The problem for Franz Ferdinand is that the driver of his car is Czech. He didn't understand anything that Franz Ferdinand just said. Not a thing. So when he gets in this car that leads the motorcade, he goes and begins the motorcade. and he's following along, and he makes the turn to go on the other way and then realizes nobody's following him. And as he's going to back up, Princip pops out of his sandwich shop and up close and personal shoots Franz and Sophie, and they die. And thus begins World War I with that assassination. All right, we're going to stop there. Please make sure you go over and do your assignment, and we will see you guys tomorrow. Have a great rest of your day.